Stephen, thank you very much for joining Can't Shovel Hurricanes. But before I formally get started, what's this I hear about you trying to take over the presidency of the HOA at Lexington Estates?
That will never happen.
No, I heard that you're jockeying. You've got.
I will never take that away from Joe. He does a phenomenal job.
I had Joe on the podcast, and he told me to lead with that. You get a good chuckle out of it. Why is it that he's trying to say that you're gonna?
He's constantly playing that game because he does such an amazing job.
He does. He actually legitimately cares. I actually had somebody knock on my door this morning for painting. And I said, do you know this guy? Because he gave me a fair price.
Sure.
And he says, I'm just about to kick him off the property. Yeah. So look, this HOA thing, everything about it, we touched on it. And then for people that don't know what HOA is, it's a homeowners association and it's big brothers watching within your community. There's pros and cons to both of it.
There definitely is.
Right?
There definitely is. You know, so the huge benefit, I've lived outside of an HOA plus in an HOA.
So you're a transplant
from New Jersey.
Florida.
Correct.
From New Jersey. Okay.
Actually a double transplant, believe it or not. So
tell me about it.
Yeah. I actually, until I was 10 years old, I lived in the islands. I lived in Curacao.
Wow.
So transitioning over to New Jersey, that's a huge culture shock. But it kind of, I moved down here when I was 22 years old, actually going back to school. So I took a slightly different path.
What'd you study?
Finance.
Okay. Me too.
I took a slightly different path with that. After high school, I was probably one of the worst high school students that you could imagine.
Me too.
Yeah. I needed a complete break, a complete reset. So I went into mortgage. My brother was working at a mortgage company. I started telemarketing there, quickly moved up the ranks. I realized I still needed to learn. There was a lot out there that I had no idea about. So I went on a pursuit, went back to school, started from the ground floor, community college, moved down here for community college, worked my way back to, went to Florida State for finance, found myself back in the real estate business.
In what way?
More so doing title insurance. And through that, I landed back into the mortgage space through one of the owners of the title company. And it was so happened to be towards the end of the, or I should say closer to the big fall, 2007, 2008.
That was ugly. I heard. Real ugly.
Very ugly. Worst time to get back into it, right?
Best time to buy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If you have the capital, absolutely.
That's right.
I've always been recruited in the insurance space, and that's where I found myself migrating to after that.
All right. So let me tell you, here's a typical conversation that me and my wife have been having before we even started the podcast. It was like, you have people saying, at first people are thinking you're crazy. Mm-hmm. And then people think that like, well, something's off. Mm-hmm. And then they're like, this looks kind of interesting. Let me reach out and ask them. And they say things to me that are like, almost like it follows a pattern. And one of the first things that they touch on is like, but you have to pay for health insurance.
Sure.
I said, yeah, you do. I said, do you think you're getting it for free in Canada? Exactly. Well, it's not exactly free. I said, yeah, you get what you pay for. And there's pros and cons to both by any stretch. But
absolutely.
I know that we have a major contingent of client base that is in the senior space that's looking to buy here. But their biggest concern is what happens with medical insurance. And that's both within the United States and Canadians. So that's your world. Talk to me about what insurance looks like today and your perspective of the world.
So before I even get started there, you brought up a great point as far as you moving down to Canada and me being a transplant and understanding that. The fact that you were able to transition so quickly, I think that needs a level of applause. I mean,
who said I transitioned?
I've seen what you did. Like I said, we were talking briefly before when I first met you, walking my dogs in the community. And you popped out. I saw you pretty much just sitting there. Your family hadn't been down. Yeah. Now you have an entire podcast. You're transitioning 2 businesses down. I mean,
thank you.
There's somebody right there who could write a book. So,
I appreciate that very much. I can tell you that this has been it's been a mind trip for all of us. And I don't know where the net result of it is.
Sure.
I do know that I don't want to live my life with regret ever. And if we didn't do this or don't do it the way we want to, I will live with regret. And hindsight's always 20/20, obviously. And there's things that I could have done way better, which is what I'm trying to relay through this podcast to listeners. But what I do know is if you don't try, you're never going to know what the other side looks like. And there's, like I said, there's a lot of things I wish I could have done better. And there's a lot of things I still don't know, but I appreciate that. I think that the thing within communities here, there really is that sense of community that happens. And once you clear that gate.
Exactly.
And that's a really cool thing.
And I have to say, there's another credit too. I say more so Joe. Right.
Yeah.
Because that HOA was completely different before he got in, before we've taken over for the previous board. And I would say the sense of community just wasn't there.
Right.
And it was a huge culture shift where, people would now wave to each other.
Yeah.
It's the simplest thing.
I walk the dog. I know you do the same. Yeah. Anybody walks by, you say hi.
Oh yeah.
Right.
I'm the consummate waver to everybody.
Yeah. But there's nothing, it doesn't cost nothing to be kind.
Not at
right?
all. Not at all.
Because I know when I have my shittiest days, it's the small acts and gestures that go the longest way. Cause I remember them like, you know what? I'm not having such a bad day.
And that's what lifts me up throughout the day, whether it's somebody doing it to me or vice versa.
Right.
Right.
And then you have the dogs too.
Exactly. Then I have the dogs just to clear my head, take that walk around. I try to get some of my exercise through that.
If humans behaved like dogs, we'd have no hardship in this life. There would be no wars.
We'd also be smelling each other's butts.
You know what? That might be coming. Today's day and age, I don't know where shit's going anymore. So who the fuck knows?
Yeah.
Let's talk about your specific space on the insurance side. So you run your own. So take it away.
Yeah, no, I own my own insurance agency with a few partners. We all came from the under 65 space. So we focused more so everything from outside of your mainstream insurance over to Obamacare, ACA plans.
Can you explain a little bit what Obamacare is?
Sure. Obamacare was, it's a government, well, it's pretty much health insurance as we see it here.
Okay.
As we speak, right? So even though it's privatized health insurance, there are certain minimum requirements that the government has put into place, where there's minimal essential coverages that everybody must get, and it's on marketplace plans. So they have a set marketplace that you're able to buy from. It's more heavily regulated. We also specialize in off marketplace plans. So people who couldn't afford health insurance previously, because the cost has gone up since Obamacare.
Just like everything else.
Oh, it's gone up incredibly.
You think the Obamacare is a culprit for the increase in 100%. Cost? Why?
100%. So you're kind of removing competition, right? So it's your big players who can afford to get in there, like your United Healthcares, your Anthems. There's some smaller players now, but the cost of it and maintaining those particular networks, and there's a lot of background noise that goes on, with maintaining all of that, as well as those levels of coverages that they have to maintain. You're looking at a family of four probably having to pay, since Obamacare was enacted, I would say 70% more in premiums.
Wow. Yeah, so it didn't do what people thought it was going to do, giving a low cost alternative to other people. What are the pros and cons to it? Like, what's the benefit?
So the pros are, there are certain benefits if you generally you're on a fixed income, right? Lower income families do get subsidized. So there's a level of subsidy, you make it more affordable. However, there's people that are left in that particular gap where before you had a family of four making $100,000. You're now making a decision whether you're paying $1,500 a month for health insurance or you're paying your mortgage.
Wow.
So
that's a big segment of.
That's a huge segment.
Okay. Right? See, so from a Canadian perspective, we didn't know anything about it. Right?
Sure. I deal at this particular point more in the Medicare space and the senior side.
So Medicare is for seniors.
For over 65 or people with disabilities, and if they've been diagnosed,
regardless of their age.
So if they're disabled, it's regardless of their age.
Okay,
but they have to go through an entire process. It typically takes around 2 years.
Oh wow!
Yeah, in order to get that full disability benefit, right? Now, in the senior side, you get Medicare, you qualify for Medicare Part A and Part B.
What are those?
So Part A are your hospitalization benefits. Part B is your doctor benefits. Part A, you automatically get once you turn 65, as long as you have, I believe it's 40 credits, which is 10 years of working, right?
Paying into the system.
Part B, then you elect and you have to pay 170. I think it went to $174 now.
A month?
A month, correct. And it comes directly out of your Social Security. Now, if somebody doesn't have that particular those particular credits in order to reach that, there's different step ups which you would have to pay. It's either $299 or $499, depending on how many credits you do have. And
in addition to,
that's for your Part B coverage, right? So,
are there deductibles along with those as well?
There are. There are deductibles and copays. Now, what we primarily offer are Plan Cs, which are also known as Medicare Advantage plans, which privatizes everything.
What are the benefits of those?
So they add in, a lot of these private companies add in a lot of additional benefits, like, they add in your prescriptions, your dentals. They also give Part B give backs for some plans. And I don't want to speak out of turn, because a lot of the times what winds up happening is, because each state, each county has different plans, different benefits, but it's interesting. Some of them have even programs where they'll take you back and forth to your doctor. And
that's county determinant, like where you basically
it's plan determinant.
Okay,
so it's plan determinant based on the different carriers, right, and the different plans that they offer within the counties.
Right. So I know that there is a huge segment here of, snowbirds, that people are here for 181 days and then they fly back and then they essentially come right back.
That's a different beast altogether.
Right. Okay. Yeah. But then I know a few of those who have families that are now in the process, already have a green card. Sure. And they're saying things like, we want to get sponsored in here, because they believe ultimately that the service level that they would get using Medicare is higher than what they would get in Canada. What would you say is, like, do most doctors take Medicare? So
there's specific Medicare doctors in network, right? I wouldn't say most doctors take Medicare.
Why would they, or why wouldn't they?
Some doctors, that's all they've done, right, is Medicare. Why wouldn't they? There's certain established doctors that are more so pediatricians, certain established doctors that there's now concierge-based doctors, especially where we are in Boca Raton.
We can't get a family doctor.
Yeah, it's a challenge.
And they're all saying that they want a concierge service. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I guess I'm in a capitalistic society, so we're in Rome. But the issue is that not only now do I would have to pay for this concierge service, I now have to pay using my insurance as well to see them. Sure. And the insurance that we're eligible for here is horrible.
Oh yeah,
because we're kind of like, we're treated like refugees in many ways.
Exactly. So, one of the biggest challenges when you're here for a short period of time is you're now relegated to only specific types of coverage. Now you have your traveler's coverage. You have your short-term medical coverage, and all of those, it's not meant to really fully take place of a full-blown coverage. Now, when you do become a full-blown citizen,
even though you don't have those credits,
on the under 65 side, you don't need the credits.
Okay, but the over 65,
you just need citizenship.
That's it.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you don't generally service that segment. You deal with the 65 and over?
Yeah. So we completely made that migration, I would say back in 2019.
Why?
Well, we just felt like, because we primarily were selling, even though that we were selling a good amount of ACA plans, we were selling off marketplace plans as well, which weren't as acceptable. So for the people who couldn't quite afford an ACA plan, the people in those gaps that we were really trying to service, it was a huge benefit to them. However, we felt with the change in administration that Obamacare might have started taking a hit. Like certain regulations were about to completely get changed. When we transitioned over to Medicare, we knew it was a lot more compliant. There was a huge barrier to entry. I mean, even as we speak today, there's a lot of compliance risk for us being in that line of work in comparison.
Can you elaborate a little bit about that? Does that matter to the day-to-day person?
It doesn't really. Well, it does, for senior citizens, right? They're a protected class, and we want to make sure that we're doing everything appropriately and properly for them, guiding them the specific way. So when you speak to a licensed Medicare agent, you're speaking to somebody who's gone through a gamut of different courses, different certifications, on top of which every single call is completely recorded from start to finish. And
Wow.
every carrier audits about 10% of every single call, every single agent that you have.
Wow. How do they have the capacity for? I mean, I guess insurance is a massive business. But.
Well, the capacity is pushed back on the agency, right? So they request a certain amount. You have to be able to manage all of that. And as soon as they request it, you're transferring all of that information over to them. You know.
Okay, so what would a call look like, or a typical client that comes your way? How does that transpire?
Sure. Well, when somebody calls in looking for Medicare coverage, we're doing a needs-based assessment. We're qualifying them to make sure that they have their Parts A and Part B plan, because again, what we're doing is combining the Parts A and Part B together, getting them some private coverage, privatized coverage, making sure that they're in the appropriate enrollment periods. And then
can you explain that? Because
Sure.
I don't know what that means.
Sure. So for Medicare Advantage, there's a series of enrollment periods. So you have your big one, which is your annual enrollment period, which runs from I believe it's midway through October to December 7th each year.
Okay.
Which they can switch from plan to plan as many times as they want. Right. So
within that window.
Within that particular window. Now, after that, at that point, we're gonna be able to go through whatever plans they qualify. But the biggest challenge is they're also getting calls by thousands of other agencies, right? And marketers, more specifically.
Try to transition them to their
correct
plans or brokerages.
So, exactly, they're getting a lot of noise, and from there, we have to be able to do as good of a job as possible to let them know, these are the plans that you qualify for. These are the benefits that you receive. We can't tell them one's better than the other. We could guide them and let them know these are the additional benefits that you receive. If those are important to them, you have to look up their prescriptions. You have to look up their doctors to make sure that they're in network. And once that happens, it's altogether about an hour phone call that they're going on, right? And that's just the initial phone call, right? There might be additional phone calls thereafter, but after December 7th, they're locked into that particular plan. Now, there's also an open enrollment period that goes from January 1st to March 31st. And that is where they can switch their plan one more time. So let's say they received their benefit cards. They called and their doctor's not in network. Their prescription's not covered at the level that they're looking for. There's certain benefits that they receive or that they're not receiving that they received previously or that they were looking for. They have the chance to switch one more time. Outside of that, the only other way that they could switch throughout the year is a special enrollment period, where that means they have a life-changing event, whether they moved out of the network coverage areas, it's with disability, it's kind of more lenient. You get to switch once a quarter for 3 quarters outside of the annual enrollment period. There's a lot to know.
I can tell you
the agents. I have to say I'm impressed every single day when they're speaking to people, going through the different specifics, speaking to each individual.
If you were to just take the issue of health insurance here alone, I'm not talking about all the other things that happened when you come down here and transplant your life. That could be off-putting and scary all on its own. Because within segments, there's segments, and then there's terminology, and there's all this stuff. And then I've run into this where I wanted to see this doctor. Doctor's like, no, I don't take this sort of health insurance. Go find another doctor. I look at the network. The network says the doctor's in. Call the doctor's like, no, I'm no longer taking it. I'm like, you know what? By the time you guys respond to me, I'll be okay. Right. And really, I need you to write a prescription. But there's also the pros and cons to like availability and the quality of care that you have access to. Like for me to see a specialist, an ENT, for example, sometimes takes months in Canada, where here is a phone call away. Boom, I'm there. Especially if I want to pay for it privately. So
in my eyes, I'll tell you this, the best thing after going through, Obamacare and the transition over to, and I call it Obamacare's ACA, the Affordable Care Act.
Okay.
But it's also known as the Obamacare.
Yeah, I know it as Obamacare.
Yeah.
I've never heard any other term.
To me, to me, the best component of that, and it's not even a component of it, but it's kind of something that happened because of it. There was all these mini clinics that popped up, right? You notice that you could go and right by CVS, they have one, inside CVS, Walgreens, Blue Cross has their own. You have the different hospitals that have little offshoots. To me, it's access of healthcare, right? The biggest issue that we had as Americans was people were experiencing the exact same thing that you were. And this is everyday Americans, but not being able to go see on a cash pay basis because they didn't have insurance.
So access was the problem, not cost.
Well, the cost rose because of the problem with access, right? So people were using the emergency rooms as their doctor visits.
Right. And you
They would
can't say no
there.
to somebody coming to an emergency
Exactly.
room.
And then, and what winds up happening is that they get charged for an emergency room visit. They don't pay it. It doesn't matter, but the hospitals wind up writing it off. And there's the huge upspin of cost.
So that's why you have this phenomenon of urgent care.
Yeah.
And you're saying that really was fueled by Obamacare.
I believe it was fueled by the times, right? It was more so
Obamacare just put gasoline on it.
I believe so, because the biggest thing was access, right? You need access to healthcare. And just like you're experiencing now, that's the biggest challenge is being able to speak to a doctor. And you're calling doctors left and right, and either they're not taking patients anymore, or they don't take your insurance.
I cannot find. I had no issue with the pediatrician. We were recommended a good one.
Sure.
They're great. So we have access to that, which is critical. But my wife and I don't have access to a family physician. Now, with that being said, I was fortunate from 30 plus years in Canada of having a physician. I fairly recently changed through no fault of his own. He knew a lot about me. So when I came in there, you don't have to explain a lot of things. They understand the psychology. They understand the family dynamic, family history. That's what you need a family physician for. Here, I can't seem to get one. But in Toronto, truth is, if I wanted to see my physician, it was a 6-7 hour wait. You can't make an appointment. So oftentimes I would have gone to these walk-in clinics, which is comparable to, I guess, an urgent care, which is sort of one and the same. But I think urgent care can treat some emergency-esque sort of stuff, broken bones and stuff like that, I think.
Yeah, some of them can, yeah.
Some can, some can't. And I had already ran into this once where I thought we needed to go with one of the kids. And I walk into an urgent care and they're like, we don't take this insurance. And on the insurance platform, it says it. So it is a dog's breakfast and is an understatement to say. But what you're dealing with is a segment of the population that's 65 and over, which is way more vulnerable to shysters, which is correct. It's way more, they're not necessarily as tech savvy and where all the information likely resides. And now
they're getting more though.
Yeah. Because as of course, I got another 25 plus years and I will become that. For sure, I'll be able to navigate
until you can't use a cell phone.
Yeah, but what's going to happen by then? Everything will be in the metaverse, and I'm going to have to see a doctor through Decentraland, and I'm going to have to speak to them virtually, and they'll probably through virtual reality give me a shot. I don't know
exactly, and the doctor's AI.
Yeah, look, AI is terrifying, man. Oh, yeah. I don't care what segment in this world you think that you will be untouchable with. I don't know if you've messed around with things like ChatGPT or Jarvis. I
just started last week.
Yeah, what'd you think?
I've been using it more so as a search engine.
Really?
But the way it comes out, you're spitting in a question, you're putting in a question, and it's spitting out like an entire synopsis.
Yeah.
And it's, I guess, scouring the internet, pulling all that information out.
It is learning also from the inputs.
Yeah.
And it lies. So you can put something in that you know something about. If it's very, very, very niche, and you write something specific, if it doesn't have an answer, it'll make one up. And if you don't know what the answer is, now you're absorbing that as real information.
That's dangerous.
Right? So it can really mess with people's minds, especially when you get young kids over there. And the biggest thing about screens and all that stuff is you don't want it to stifle their creativity. Mm-hmm. Now, if you've got somewhere where you don't have to think for yourself and you're going out there and doing this thing, and ChatGPT is, it's gone through many iterations and I'm by no means an expert. I think is just the tip of the iceberg of what's likely been behind the scenes.
From what I'm hearing, yeah.
Right? And I think there isn't a segment in this world that will not be impacted.
I was just speaking with my web developer just yesterday, and he was telling me, or the day before, and he was just telling me about ChatGPT, but I was asking him if he's using it to build his websites. He works for a lot of attorneys up in the Northeast. And I'm like, are you building websites with this? He goes, I will use it for ideas. I will not use it to actually build out a website. I will never use it for creative because, number one, to your point, you don't know if it's lying or not, if it's accurate, and then you start losing that ability, personally. But on top of that, he says that Google's already building out different technology in order to identify certain websites that are, that they have the copyright through ChatGPT or different AI platforms. So if it ranks lower, he loses money. So he's like, I might as well make sure that everything is original. My copywriters make sure that everything is original. You could use it for ideas, but you can't copy it.
It is like a arms race in web world. And I've seen even people take content. So I heard this one guy, what he used to do is, and this would be applicable to your space, my space, any space really. He gets subject matter experts and he watches content that they create or videos or a talk about a certain subject, and they use OtterBox. OtterBox is a dictation tool. So when you're watching people get interviewed, they'll usually have the app on OtterBox and they'll record their voice and they'll create the write-up. So when they're writing a news article, they can use that as a platform. Excuse me.
That works.
And then they take that OtterBox and then they throw it into something like Jarvis. And then it rewrites it for them. And then they'll throw it into something like ChatGPT and it'll create a spin of something that somebody else wrote. Now they've got organic content. And then there's now other AI that takes all that stuff and makes it non-AI machine, but used an AI machine. Like they'll make it much more creative and original. So there's like this process that's happening in behind the scenes. I'm not scared of it from the respect that I know it's coming. We're going to have to learn how to work in that world. And I also think that there is a major shortage of labor in a lot of streams. And I think that in order to keep costs down, I think AI will be the next thing that brings us down into much more affordability because it's a very scalable sort of thing. And some things you'll have to do, like you can't get AI at the moment to give you a massage.
Sure.
Right? But you can get AI to give you a lot of service-based information that you may have otherwise maybe was a lawyer or a realtor or an accountant.
Until we get to the point of like ex machina.
Yeah, exactly. And then it'll manipulate that. Yeah, I know that movies are really, And I don't know if a lot of people have seen it. It's really cool.
No, it's an amazing movie.
Right?
Especially now that we're talking about AI.
And think about when it was made, right?
Exactly.
So it's like, have you ever seen A Clockwork Orange?
Yes.
Right. That's like talking about what the Brave New World would look like then. It was
that just goes to show you everything's an evolution, right? We had life before cell phones.
Yeah.
We had life before smartphones.
Right.
Then computers and the capabilities of computers. And now it's just
these are computers that can call, right? They're not.
I tell people I could launch rockets with my phone. Yeah. It's basically, from what did they say? That the Apollo 13
had less information or less power than the average cell phone today. Exactly. Way less power than because the access from the internet. But like our job as parents is going to be likely biggest challenge is to shelter our kids from it.
How do you see it being used in your space?
From a real estate perspective?
Yeah.
So first and foremost, it's already out there and you have, I say a really weak version of, cost-based analysis on properties. And that's something like Zillow that people can get to. But the Zillow algorithm is not even close to really having the reality of what's happening in the market and how quickly the market can swing. And COVID was a perfect example of that. So it takes historic information and tries to extrapolate it, but it's always learning from what happened historically versus trying to plug in the market factors. And I'm surprised it doesn't, of what is going to be like. You speak to a really good realtor, you speak to somebody who's seasoned, they could tell you what's coming a couple of weeks before it's coming, because they have those phone calls with people and they start becoming consistent. Like when the market started to dip, I hear, well, we're going to wait for it to hit the bottom. And we're just going to wait and see. We're not sure yet. We're just going to see where the market is going to go.
Yeah. At that point, you run into trying to catch a falling sword.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. But a computer system, at least the ones that are around today, can't speak to that.
Gotcha.
Right. And then you have the segment of when the market's really like rushing up, where there's no rationale for it and there's scarcity in the market and people are trying to grab at anything that they can grab at. The system tells you what it was like before and looks at the history and just shows you a chart up, but doesn't tell you where it's actually going to net out.
Sure.
Right. I think a lot of that could be done away with so simply with the form of AIs. First of all, create open bidding in a scarce environment. Create open bidding. Let everybody see what the other person is bidding. I'm sure people will find a way to manipulate that.
Sure.
There's no doubt in my mind. Right.
Sure.
But when you put in a human element like a realtor that's giving you counsel and a lot of other things, what's the community like? What's the property like? Searching out when the windows were done, when the roof was done, the overall, how much money they need to spend on bringing the house up to snuff. Like there's so much that can be done. There's still value, but the realtor is more of like that neutral party that is in between buyers and sellers. It's not homes don't sell homes, realtors sell homes.
Sure.
So when you get a buyer and a seller trying to sell to one another, it almost never happens. And it doesn't happen because it's an emotional decision for both of them. That's first of all. The realtor takes that neutrality completely off the table, right? There's a commission involved and everyone
It's like
thinks
a buffer.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But in addition to that, you've got, if you're trying to do a direct transaction, we actually have one in our community right now who doesn't want to cooperate with realtors.
I just saw that.
And you know why that is? Because he's priced about $200,000 over market and doesn't want any realtor to tell him that. Gotcha. So he's hoping some poor sucker out there is going to come in and pay him whatever he thinks it's worth, because they're not getting any real counsel from a realtor.
And is there more of an ability now than years past because of Zillow and Realtor?
Oh, absolutely.
They're able to market to different areas, right? So let's say if they, you put it on there, somebody from New York is still going to see it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
But people always understand their own intuitive cost and based analysis, right?
Sure.
And the information is all wide out in the open. You can see what historic prices were like. But if I walked you into whatever store and I told you, here, this tomato's $30 here, and you'd be like, it doesn't add up.
Yeah.
Right. But if I told you tomatoes $4, you'd be like, okay, it seems a little bit high, but I can understand why that costs, how it costs. When it comes to real estate, people are the same. They look at what's around and they walk into like this particular situation of $1.2 million in the community we live in. And they'll like, this doesn't add up. But that person that's listing and doesn't want to use a realtor because they never take that listing at that price point because it makes no sense. Sure. They have to spend marketing dollars and their time on something that's never going to sell. And what this individual is hoping is that some sucker is going to come in without any guidance or counsel, because no realtor in their right mind is going to say there's fair market value here.
Sure.
If I was writing an offer on that, I'd be like, you know what? I'd start at 900. It's worth 930.
Yeah.
Like,
that's kind of in our community, right? I mean, our community is very well off.
Yeah.
From an appreciation standpoint.
Right. I know I'm the highest sale in the community because I had very poor counsel, and I had a very seasoned agent on the other side who knew exactly what he was doing, that played my realtor like a fiddle.
Wow.
Right. And AI is definitely going to intrude into that business. It hasn't already. There isn't going to be a facet of our lives that we will not be touched by it in any way, shape, or form, if we're not already without even knowing it. Mm-hmm. I mean, Google's been manipulating what we think and what we do, and is such a powerful tool, but I think it's terrified of ChatGPT, which is a Microsoft product. And there's going to be this arms race that ever happened. And now that's just our little segment of the world. I mean, now you got the other forces that are happening politically, and, TikTok being banned from government officials because how intrusive it is to
well, from my understanding, the biggest challenge there, right, is such a blanket act that they're trying to pass. So what I hear it described as the Patriot Act on steroids.
Yeah.
Where it's all encompassing, as opposed to a 10-page act.
Right.
It's hundreds of pages. So giving the government leverage in order to obstruct any sort of speech they don't like.
Now, I'm going to make an assumption.
Sure.
That you are a right-leaning individual.
I can appreciate that, but I'm a die-hard centrist.
Centrist.
Yes.
You're in the wrong country, brother.
Yeah.
And I think that
and it's from centrist from a perspective that I will never completely align with either party.
Yeah, I agree. I think that is like 90% of Americans, man.
Exactly.
And me coming down here, it's the same thing.
They don't know it. They don't know it. They say, hey, I've
don't have that choice.
I have these feelings, and I want to make sure that, my government representative is going to make sure that they're going to take that into account. And to me, I kept on saying, even as a kid, before I had the ability to vote, my question was, what happens? They're telling you that they're on your side. They're telling you everything that you want to hear, but what have they done? And after cycle after cycle, election cycle after election cycle, and you see nothing being done. This is before I had the ability to vote. So in my mind, I'm like, why am I going to align with anybody? Right. Okay. I would say economically conservative, right?
Fiscally liberal. I mean,
fiscally conservative, but
socially liberal.
It's funny. I would, the more I look at it, I don't know that I'm completely fiscally conservative, and I don't feel like I'm completely socially liberal either, right? Because there's so many different dynamics within those two components. It's easy to say, hey, I'm going to put everything in this bucket and everything in that bucket. Just like saying I'm right-leaning, left-leaning.
During COVID,
sure,
for example, were you happy to be a Floridian?
After, yeah.
100%. Or even before that, I mean,
100%. I mean, I've been happy. I never left after I came down here for school.
Right. Would you ever leave?
Would I? Yeah. The situation would have to be perfect.
Right.
I mean, I love it here.
Yeah.
The weather's beautiful. The people, I love that it's such a melting pot and so diverse. It's
funny you should say diverse, because to me, it's not. Yeah. Really? Coming like, especially when you go county by county.
Okay.
Versus like if you're in the heart of Toronto and otherwise.
Sure.
You see real melting pot. You see real diversity everywhere. Now is that
more of a big city type of living?
No. So I lived in suburbia. I lived in Vaughan, which is just north of Toronto, which is part of the greater Toronto area. And more specifically in a place called Thornhill, which was a small, but, overwhelming Jewish community at that point. So that's where it kind of lacked its diversity, and you get little pockets of neighborhoods where you get, people from mainland China or people specifically from Southeast Asia. And then you get, but they're all so close and clustered to one another.
Sure.
That you can drive 5 or 10 minutes in either direction and have cuisine from different places, and it'll be really, really authentic and really, really
cool. Is it more spread out over here?
Way more. Oh my God. First of all, the public transit system here is almost non-existent.
Exactly. That does need a lot to be desired. Have a lot to be desired.
For sure. And I think logistically, you can't really build subways on the ground here because flooding is a real problem. And I don't know what's happening under the earth, but I mean, it's a completely different climate, and I wouldn't know if it would even be feasible.
Sure.
Right. To do it. But it's way more spaced out. Mm-hmm. You can't get anywhere without a car. Public transit is almost non-existent. So it's a real challenge for people.
It's funny because I feel like you could get north and south, right? You have the tri-rail, you have the...
That's not cheap, right? So it's like $25 or something like that to get on.
I've only gone on it once. And that was from the airport here. I don't remember it being that expensive though.
Really? Okay. So that's what somebody said to me. I'm not speaking from experience, but
it could be. I have no idea, but relative to what, right? Because if we don't have any other public transport.
Well, you're from Jersey, right?
Oh, yeah.
The public transport there's.
I was in Jersey 23 years ago. Everything was cheaper then.
Right. Right. Do you still have family in Jersey?
Yeah, I have some family in Jersey.
Do you have a lot of family here? Do you have like a support network?
So I moved my mother down back in 2013, and my uncle shortly there. Actually, same year. So
does she live close?
Melbourne.
I have no idea where that is.
Melbourne's about 2 hours north of here. Beautiful, beautiful area.
Does she like it?
She loves it here. She loves it here.
The healthcare that she was receiving in Jersey, is it the same healthcare that she's receiving in Florida?
She was on Medicare, and before then she had it through her work. So yeah, it was the same.
So the work sponsored it. What would it cost for an individual that, I guess it's almost it's like me saying to you, how expensive is a car, right? So I hate when people ask me stuff like that, but I mean, there's got to be some sort of average cost base to what is a senior citizen, right?
So when you're talking about the senior market, the Medicare Advantage market, they're paying typically a zero premium, maybe as high as like $75 a month. They're fixed base income, and most of it's coming out of their Social Security. And when you're talking about Medicare supplements, which that is if you have your Part A and Part B, and you have a supplement plan that's supplementing the coverage, covering those gaps that you have in your coverage, right? So your deductibles, your copays.
What about medication?
Medication as well. Your prescription could be in there as well, depending on the plan that you have. So those typically range from, I would say, $50 to $75 a month, probably $75 a month, all the way to several hundred, and the challenge with Medicare supplement plans as opposed to Medicare Advantage plans. So a supplement plan is they go through medical underwriting. Now they're absolved of medical underwriting for their first, for 6 months prior to they turn 65.
And that's like a physical medical underwriting? Is that,
no, they go through a background check. So
there are people that don't qualify?
Correct. So if you're going,
senior citizens that do not qualify, what do they do?
I think I'm kind of getting the two, like overstepping on both of them, right? Okay. So you have your Medicare supplement plan, which is just a supplement to your Medicare Parts A and Part B, which are supplied by the government, right?
Okay.
You also have your Medicare Advantage plans, which the entire thing is combined and privatized. So the one that's combined and privatized typically is nothing out of pocket. It's anywhere from $0 to $70 a month, typically, The supplement plan could be anywhere from like $75 a month to several $100s a month, $400 or $500 at certain points, depending on the plan that you have. Now, somebody who's on a fixed based income, more likely than not, is not going to be on a supplement plan. Gotcha. Somebody who's retiring with, $100,000 in annual income, that's more of the market for supplement plans. Somebody who's on a fixed base income and retiring is probably going to lean more towards a Medicare Advantage plan. Now they're getting a lot more benefits. Before they used to solely be HMOs. Now they have PPOs. Now those are two different types of networks. Can you
explain HMOs and PPOs?
There are two different types of networks. So HMO is a health maintenance organization. It was generally made to be a small regional network. Originally, the way it was designed was more so for to ensure that you're upkeeping with your health, right? But it's a small regional network. So if you go out of state, you're out of network unless there's an emergency. And an emergency to me and you is completely different to the insurance carrier.
Sure.
So you'd be out of network at that point.
Paying your out of privately.
Well, you'd pay your out of network rates. There's specific rates and specific guidelines that they have within the plans. On a PPO, typically it's national, right? You could go to any doctor or hospital that's within that PPO network, and they're typical national networks. Now they're gravitating more towards PPOs. We're seeing a lot more PPOs come on these Medicare Advantage plans, which are great for senior citizens who travel. And that was one of the biggest restrictions that people were gravitating more towards the supplement plans. Because you have senior citizens that typically like to fly all over the place and travel, see their grandkids. And at that point, if they're out of state, they might not have the right coverage that they need. And if something were to happen, and inevitably at some point in time, something's going to happen, they just better hope that they're in their right network. And
so there's like a major migration from a couple of states, California, New York, or probably like the overwhelming majority. So
sure.
You've got seniors that now are following their kids. And I'm seeing a lot of that happening because there's like 350,000 new people that have moved into South Florida. Florida as a whole, but overwhelming majority of that went into South Florida.
Yeah.
And they fit into a demographic of young professionals, young kids starting up their communities. And what's coming in behind them is their parents.
Sure.
And they're all coming down here. So let's say I was, a parent and listening to this podcast and my kids just moved to Boca or somewhere else. How would they connect with you to make sure that they have the right plan for when they move into South Florida?
What I'll do is I'll put my contact information. We can probably put it in the bio.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But
yeah.
you can just say it now. So just at least people.
So yeah,
the
name of my company is Family First Insurance Advisors.
Family First Insurance Advisors.
I'll have a specific phone number that they could call in. They could get whatever guidance. And we're not one of those companies. And typically when you're talking to solely a Medicare Advantage agency, you're not going to get agents that are going to try and pigeonhole you into a specific plan. We sell everything.
Why would an agent want to do that?
Well, they're going to sell what they have to offer.
Not everybody has the same offering?
Correct. Depending on the agency, right?
Right. Okay.
That's why
That's interesting.
To me, I like to make sure that we don't have too broad of an offering, but we have everything that a senior citizen's going to need.
And what if somebody calls you and says, look, I need something like this. It doesn't seem to be what you guys are offering. How would you handle that in that situation?
Oh, at that point, we let them know that that's not something that we are able to offer them. However, we might have partnerships where we're able to refer them out to. If not, we tell them exactly who to call.
That's amazing.
There's no scenario that we're going to take somebody and put them into a worse position. We strive to do what's best for people, and that's one of the reasons why we named the company that we did. Right. You always go, when you're starting a company, you have some sort of naming convention. And the first thing that myself and my partners wrote down was what the most important things that we have, and the reason why we're starting our company. It's always family. Right. And we look at it as families helping families. And if the greatest component is we have the agents that have the same exact philosophy. They're going to treat you the exact same way they're going to treat their own parents.
And how long does a discovery call usually take? Is it accessible? Do they have to book you well in advance?
No. It's very accessible. I have about 30 agents, and licensed all over. We do service most every state. In the states that we don't service, we typically just refer out.
So when they're moving from a different state into, let's say, Florida, it's a different insurance that they need. Right, correct? And I understand.
Correct. Yeah, exactly.
And that's because different states have.
And each agent has to be licensed in the state that they're selling in. So our agents are licensed in each of them are licensed in close to 20 states.
Okay. And is it transferable? Like, meaning,
it'll transfer for, let's say, the first 3 months. Right. They'll have a good transition period. But before then, you want to start speaking to somebody. You want to make sure that you do have a plan in place.
Okay. And how quickly can you transition from one to the other? Is it also easy?
Yeah, immediately.
So it's something you guys handle on the back end?
So it's literally the next effective date, right? So your effective dates are first of each month. So now we're in April. So it would be May 1st. So as of May 1st, your transition in coverage would be the new coverage plan that you're placed on.
That's amazing. You're gonna provide me with that contact info. Yeah, we'll have it in the bio for the podcast.
Absolutely.
And then everybody can reach out to you. I think because you're a transplant, and because I think a lot of people, most people are really transplants to Florida in some way, shape, or form.
Sure.
I think there is the demographic shift that's happening at the moment with young families coming on here. I think they're going to be the one that kind of sets the tone towards wanting to have their kids stay. And they're going to build out the communities. They're going to build out the infrastructure, business, et cetera. Because I mean, I don't want my kids to leave. I'm sure, my mom didn't want me to leave. My wife's parents.
But I'll say this. I've been here for 23 years now. And that's all I've been seeing. I've seen the migration come in. I've seen the families and communities build. You see it constantly. Families like yours, west of 441 where we are, right? Didn't exist. That was more the Everglades about 30 years ago.
Right. So it's not that far.
It's not that long ago.
Right.
Not that long ago. But the constant community building. And again, it's an evolution.
Have you ever felt unsafe?
Have I ever? Depends on where I went.
I meant, and in
certain parts of Florida, South Florida, yes.
Really?
However, Boca Raton as a whole, absolutely not.
Right. Do you have any issues with your kids playing outside in front of the house without you?
I mean, let's put it where, say exactly what it is. We're in a gated community.
Right.
right? So
The fact that you need a gated community speaks
exactly.
to okay.
Exactly.
Most of the places I come from don't have those.
Yeah. And I grew up outside of a gated community.
I'm sure you did. So did I.
In Fort Lee, New Jersey, which is right across the George Washington Bridge, a nice little suburb in New Jersey.
Now, would you let your kids play outside without your supervision in that place today?
I don't know. I'd have to look.
I'm sure you played outside.
I did. And I got into my fair share of trouble.
Yeah.
So
there's nothing wrong with that. I just think
not at all.
The trouble that's looming today, and I hate to sound old, the ramifications of it being something really, really bad are way higher today.
Sure.
Than they were before.
Or it's more in your face, right? It's also our exposure to information.
Yeah.
Where we didn't have it. How like when something happens now, you get an alert on your phone, Amber Alert, everything. Yeah. It's instant. Whereas years past, when we're growing up, that type of news takes time to travel.
Yeah, I think you also you had a lot more of parents were okay with you being outside because they knew other parents were okay with their kids being outside. So there was a watchful eye indirectly.
It was like the latchkey generation, right?
Yeah.
The onset of the latchkey generation, which at one point I was a latchkey kid myself, and other parents, to your point, within the community would always keep that watchful eye out for the other kids. Down here, because there's so many transplants, I feel like maybe not even transplants, but just people moving into different communities at any given point in time. They could be moving from Florida. Not as many people know each other. I feel like there's certain communities that are more in touch with each other than others. I feel like what our little HOA is doing and how tight knit we are since we're a smaller community.
Yeah, I think that makes a big difference.
That's why I love where we live.
Right.
Right. Because almost everybody knows everybody. I have a little 7-year-old daughter.
Right.
Right. And you asked me that question, and my thought is, I don't know when I'm going to have that moment of not having that apprehension of letting her go play out by herself.
Yeah, no, I know. I also have a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old and a 4-year-old. And I think I'm not so concerned about, I'm always going to be close enough. My biggest concern right now is cars.
Yes.
If they're playing on the road and riding their bikes and rollerblading and stuff like that, which will try to get them to be outside a whole lot more.
Sure.
I don't have that fear of other people by any stretch. I think because it's a gated community. But I also know that the other day, it was a couple of months ago, there was something in the Facebook group about, a sex offender walking through the neighborhood. And Joe had mentioned something like that. And I'm like, how did you know, first of all? And how quickly are people on top of it? So that gives me some certain sense of security that, people are always watching. But the flip side of that is, why are people always watching?
Sure.
You know what I mean? And why do we have sex offenders close to our gated community?
Well, I feel like nowadays, again, it goes to the speed of information, right? I don't know if you remember years ago watching like the Oprah. She had a couple of different types of shows, right? She had the show that she's giving everything away.
Yeah,
you got a call.
Yeah,
you got it.
Right. I remember that.
Yeah. Then she has other shows, and this is actually a comedian's bit, but it rings so true. You have the ones where then you have the sex offender could be right next to you. If you pull up this app and all of a sudden the red dot goes, and then you pull it up by your house, it's you're like, what the hell's going on? Where am I living?
Right.
It's again, the information that we're getting, the speed of that information, and whether we like it or not, it's here. And if we use it as a tool, the great thing is, obviously we were talking about him before, but Joe is very plugged in. Being an ex New York police officer,
right? He
has that spidey sense about him where he knows it's not the first time that he's caught somebody in the community, not necessarily a sex offender, but who shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be there, yeah.
And he's very quick, along with other people in the community, very quick to point it out. And again, we just got our gates up. Which is a huge benefit, a lot.
So you're pro. I think they're great. I think some people are complaining about them because it takes a little longer to get in and out, but I mean, whatever.
Slight inconvenience for a long-term benefit.
What would you say the percentage, if you had to guess, and it's absolutely a guess, of the residents within the community that are armed as a percentage of what is it, 216 houses in
206. I would say probably 50%.
Wow.
At least. Yeah. At least.
Wow.
Yeah.
Dare I ask if you're one of those people?
I am. Okay. I am.
All right,
you know, I mean, it's funny because as I never, I didn't care about weapons regardless, you know, guns. I've gone shooting before I even got my own. But as soon as I found out I was having a daughter, changed my perspective. As soon as I had my daughter, that was a paradigm shift.
Right.
Right. You know, and I'm sure you can relate. You know,
Absolutely.
it's a different level of responsibility.
Absolutely.
Right?
I think I don't worry about the quality of parent I am. And maybe this is bad to say, as much to my son as I am to my daughter or my daughters. And my biggest fear is that not that I'll fuck them up or make mistakes as a parent, because I'm making mistakes and have made mistakes in this move.
We're
like
human.
I said, yeah, but this one really, the transition itself creates an element of guilt that is so unprecedented that I never felt as a parent before, and I have parent guilt. My wife is the same. Is my biggest fear for my kids is that if they grew up thinking that I ever loved them conditionally. And nothing, I'm not talking about education. I'm not talking about, how much time I spent with them, or if I want to know that my kids grew up knowing no matter what they did or how upset I was or frustrated or maybe didn't have enough time for them, I don't want them to grow up thinking that whatever they needed to do, that their love was ever conditional. And that's my biggest fear towards my daughters, because I know that growing up, the girls that had, I don't know if that's the right thing to say, the daddy issues.
Sure. And that's a real thing.
I'm sure it's a real thing. I think it's the same thing for men, mommy issues and stuff like that. But girls are like a fragile species and are perceived as prey by
do you think it's more so because you and I are men and we recognize what other men sometimes,
without a shadow of a doubt,
we were all kids,
and we're fucking heathens.
But we went through the entire stage.
Yeah.
Right.
Of course. Of growing
up, and you see how it's not even like boys play rougher. Right. So I'm at the stage where I protect my daughter from a rough playing boy typically. Right. I want to make sure that,
I see from a sexual urge from a man and how powerful that thirst can be, especially once you get to certain age groups. And it's just because their body's going through all these changes, and depends who they're certain, like the limits or lack thereof that some boys, and it's a small segment of boys that don't have guidance or rules or an outlet, what they will do to have access to that, and now, vis-a-vis the internet and how much more access they have, how much more women should be protected. That's the stuff that scares me. And to add to that, I think we're in a day and age where we are trying to overcompensate by this equality bullshit of like men have to be more like women, women have to be more like men. And we're blurring these lines and confusing these kids where people are like, well, what the fuck? I mean, I think that there is purity in how we are as individuals, and there is now acceptance that I think a lot of humanity has, but we're trying to overcompensate for a very, very, very small minority that is suffering from a mental health perspective in many ways, and should be nurtured and cared for, but not at the expense of, the majority. Confusing exactly.
Right. And I think that's one of the things that, COVID, with everybody with the lockdowns, and the kids having to have that additional screen time of either going to school that way and not having that face-to-face interpersonal interaction. Right.
You guys had a minor lockdown here, right? 6 weeks?
In comparison, but it still had its.
You really think it had that much of an impact?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Really? Even though
you could definitely see it, because even though that it wasn't as long, I remember still going out after a few months and there's still stores closed down. Like you could drive by Kohl's and Kohl's was closed, or, didn't have extended hours. Nothing was normal anymore.
Was your business impacted during that time?
Actually, no. We thrived because we're a call center based company. And we just sent our agents home with their computers, their headsets, allowed them to earn the entire time. We didn't turn off. We went back in, I believe at the end of July.
Do you even need office space now? Is that something that you actually need as I'm sure pre-COVID, you're like, we need an office.
Sure.
Right?
Sure. I'm of the belief that somebody being in the office, you develop more of that
right.
sense of, again, we talk about community, but there's different forms of community.
Right.
And I think it's huge. And the fact that we also have a huge compliance base that we have to cater to, a lot of that is you don't have as much oversight if they're at home, right?
Right.
You want to make sure all their information, because we deal with a lot of information challenges as well, right? So you can't allow people to have any sort of PCI information, which is like personal contact information.
Okay.
You can't allow them to have any medical information laying around. Everything has to be input to the system, encrypted, and that's it. You can't even pull it back up without, specific passwords. And
I can imagine what kind of security measures you guys have to have, because I didn't even think about it from that scope, but the kind of stuff that you're privy to and you're hearing and you have access to. I mean, it's really sensitive shit that could be used against somebody if it's in the wrong hands. So the compliance issue's got to be, like, from your perspective, it's got to be a major cost as well.
It's a major cost and the number one challenge, I would say.
Really?
Right. I would say the number one hurdle into transitioning into that particular space, you would be surprised on the level of detail that's requested from you, just in order to get your appointments up.
What would you want seniors that are looking for an insurance solution to know about you guys and how you can help them?
I think more so than know about us, right? Because we're a drop in the bucket. I would want them to do their due diligence on their insurance agent. Make sure that they're licensed. They're licensed in that state.
There are people working unlicensed?
There's definitely unlicensed, unlicensed people. But the challenge is not necessarily them not having a license, but not knowing what they're properly supposed to do as far as the guidance, the appropriate steps, also guiding them into the wrong plans, or just making sure that they're getting a quote unquote sale, which we don't look at it as a sale. We look at it as just making sure that we're helping somebody. And again, I mentioned this before, but if we can't help you, we're not going to help you. We're going to point you into the right direction. And it's not about us making a sale. It's about helping somebody.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And you're a genuine human being. I can speak and vouch to it.
I appreciate that. And that's,
and we'll have the information in the bio. I got to tell you, from my perspective, I'm grateful for your time. I'm grateful for you being here, educating. I think we can extrapolate this even further. And there's topics that are not, that we haven't even specifically touched on the insurance space.
I like the breadth of conversation that we had.
Yeah, because it's real, right? It's two people having a conversation. You moved here way before I have. Sure. I'm like in the thick of it right now. The best way I can explain it is like drinking from a fire hose. I don't know what I don't know. Sometimes you talk to people and you kind of overanalyze their intentions plus your own. I know what I keep saying to my wife is that we've established our core competencies here, but we're just trying to plug what we know best into an environment that needs to accept us. It's a real transplant of an artery, but we can't expect that everything we've done in the past and the way we've done it in the past is going to apply the same way here. So I'm genuinely inquisitive and interested in other people. I learned so much from having conversations with other people, especially people that are experienced. I want to make sure that I'm always giving back to the community and the people that are around me in ways that will benefit everybody. And it's not just financially. And I don't know where I'm going to net out because my expectations that the way things I did in Canada are going to work out in the same way they worked out here is asinine. It's foolish because the market's way different. The expectations are way different. Culturally, people behave very differently. So I'm going out there and trying to just ask as many questions, shake as many hands, meet as many people until we really find out like this is what the in the box solution would look like to anybody who's coming down. Like I want to give somebody here's the solution that really you need. Here's the whole network, the gamut of people you need to call them in advance, have this prepared, and then you can just touch down here and we'll have everything set up for you so you don't make the same mistakes we did.
That's amazing. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast was to see somebody come down and make that transition so quickly. Not only that, but I mean, set your roots down. To me, it was like seamless. It's almost like you and your wife have been there forever.
Thank you, man. I listen, it's hard for me to accept like compliments and things like that because I don't feel like we've.
But you're doing it.
Yeah, we're doing it. And if we look back, 8 months ago or 9 months ago since we got here and we look back today, yeah, I know where to go and I know people's names and I can say hi to somebody and I don't have to worry about my kids playing outside.
Sure.
That's progress, right? And my father saying that I use every single time and I almost use it at every single one of my podcasts. And he told me before he passed is that any problem that you can fix with money isn't really a problem. And he's 100% correct. And we just now have to work out the business end of things. And I will look at it 2 to 3 years from now and say, this is where I want to be. And this is paradise.
Wow. That's beautiful.
Dude, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. You're the best. I'll see you in the neighborhood.
All right. Likewise.
Take it easy.